the NFL should cancel the draft. And I'm not just talking about for this year, I mean for good. Because in theory, it makes sense for the worst teams to get a chance at the best prospects for the following year so they can improve their team for years to come and we can have a balanced league. But in practice, a team has picked first overall twice within 2 years, 10 different times in NFL history. And the Panthers have been picking in the top 10 since 2020 and will do so again come this April. So it's obvious that draft positioning isn't going to fix an abysmal franchise. Franchises aside, what about these college football players that are forced to go to shitty teams without a choice in the matter? Trevor Lawrence was a generational talent that everyone knew would be the top pick in the draft from the time he was in high school. And he ended up going to Jacksonville, who has done nothing to develop him into the superstar he should be. Not only does that suck for Trevor Lawrence, I mean, kind of, he's got $270 million plus out of it, but he would have gotten that from anyone. But it sucks for the NFL to waste that kind of talent. Even if the draft seems like the best way to balance out the league, which I will argue further in this video that it is not, it's definitely not the best way to make sure that top talent coming into the league is able to reach their full potential. So I think that the NFL should ditch the draft in favor of a separate free agency period specifically for rookie players coming into the league. Instead of letting the draft order and therefore the last season's finishing records dictate the fates of these young men, let the market decide it. I'm not talking all-out free-for-all Matt Stafford contracts. There should still be a rookie max, which would be equal to what the first overall pick gets. And last year, Caleb Williams signed a 4-year, $39.5 million contract. So it would be somewhere around there. But other than that, the players would get what the market decides. So in a season like last year, where there were multiple top-rated quarterbacks, maybe 2, 3, or even 4 players end up getting that rookie max. But in a year like this, where it's assumed Cam Ward is going number 1, but he's not considered an absolute can't-miss talent like some of the QBs from last year. So maybe no one gets the max. Whatever the case is, the player gets to decide where they want to play. But this isn't just going to help the player. Right now, if a team really covets a specific player at the top of the draft, they have to do what the Panthers did in 2023 to get Bryce Young. Sell their future to acquire one player whose future is inevitably hurt in the process as well. What the Panthers did was stupid, but we've seen other teams fall for this trap through the years. With the Redskins when they traded everything for RG3, and the Rams when they traded up for Jared Goff in 2016, and there have been varying degrees of success with this move. But let's just look at 2023, that Bryce Young draft. Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, for that matter, were not going to Chicago. So the Bears, who had done a terrible job putting a competent team together in the years since Caleb Parkey kicked them out of the playoffs, now they have this incredibly valuable asset that they had done nothing to earn, and they were holding both the league and these 2 great, maybe even 3 great young quarterbacks hostage with a pick no one thought they were going to draft a quarterback with. Meanwhile, there are at least 3 teams that are willing to spend a top pick on a quarterback based on Young, Stroud, and Anthony Richardson all going in the top 4. But if you really imagine and think about it, you could see that Seattle, Vegas, and Atlanta, who all also had top 10 picks, might have been interested in drafting one of those top quarterbacks. So Chicago gets to play maybe up to 6 teams off of each other to extract the most value they possibly could out of this first pick that by nature they backed into. And boy, oh boy, did they extract that value. And let me be clear, I am not excusing the Panthers for making this stupid move. I'm saying there shouldn't be a system that allows the Bears to benefit so much from going 3-14 and giving up 58 sacks in 2022. So let's say that it's all worked out the same way, except in 2023, we had my free agency idea. You could add the Steelers, the Titans, the Patriots, the Commanders, maybe even the Bucks into those teams that would be interested in those top QBs in that draft. But now, instead of the Bears holding all the cards by virtue of the 2022 season, the QBs themselves hold all the cards. So if Carolina still wanted to make a run at Bryce Young, they could offer the same money they did without having to give up the opportunity to continue to improve their team, like what happened with the trade to Chicago. Or Bryce Young could decide he didn't want to go to Carolina. He could say that Seattle or Pittsburgh or New England, anybody else gave him a better opportunity to have a successful career, and he could sign with them, likely still for the same money he would have gotten from Carolina in the first place. It's obviously a benefit for Bryce Young with this change, but I think that everybody in this scenario wins aside from the Chicago Bears, who don't deserve to win. They have done such a bad job that they were the worst team in the league. Why should they benefit from that? Especially to the degree in which they did from this Carolina trade that would have happened from Carolina or any of those other teams that we were talking about. They were going to extract value from that first pick that they did not deserve. So what about the opposite scenario going on, right? In 2022, Jacksonville had their second straight first overall pick, which tells you all you need to know about Jacksonville. But they picked Trayvon Walker, who's been great, but maybe not first overall pick great. The 2022 draft, though, it wasn't the strongest draft. 7 of those first-round picks have made a Pro Bowl in their first 3 years in the league, while 6 of the first-round picks from 2024 made the Pro Bowl in their rookie season. A little bit of an imbalance there. So, where Chicago failed their way into one of the most valuable draft picks in recent NFL history, and probably one of the most valuable assets in recent NFL history, Jacksonville didn't find the same value from doing that in 2022. Both because of the lack of quarterbacks and the fact that the strongest position in the draft, defensive end, was super deep. 11 defensive ends were picked in the first 2 rounds. So even if Jacksonville wanted to trade out of that pick, there wouldn't be much to trade for. So then they're kind of stuck picking even if they weren't that interested in the players at the top of the draft. And not only that, they had to pay the first overall pick contract, which for Trayvon Walker was only about $2 million less than Caleb Williams' contract over 4 years. So you're paying generational quarterback money for maybe a top end or middle to top end defensive end that you maybe did or didn't want. And you could say whatever you want about them picking Walker over Hutchinson or Thibodeaux or whoever it is. If rookie free agency was a thing, then they still would have had a chance to go get Walker, but not having to pay him like Caleb Williams or Bryce Young or Trevor Lawrence, who they were already paying. Because no matter how good a defensive end is, they will never be as valuable as a superstar QB, which these top picks are meant to be. So if you don't take a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, you're inherently getting so much less value just based on the rookie scale and how much more valuable a quarterback will be in the long run versus a defensive end. Then the situation is kind of like a snake eating its own tail, right? If you get a top 5 pick in the draft, you're going to be a shitty team. Your probably quarterback is not very good, so you want to reach for a quarterback anyway. And not only that, the quarterback tends to be the most valuable because if you get a quarterback for $10 million a year for 4 years, that is an insane discount versus, like we said, a wide receiver or a defensive end or even these second and third most valuable positions on the field. $10 million is not that big of a discount for what you would be paying a top receiver or a top D end after the rookie contract. But then you end up bringing a quarterback into a situation that's not very good. So even if they're a really, really good quarterback, they're not going to look that way because they're not going to win games. They're going to get sacked. They're going to throw picks. Like, it's not going to look good because you brought him into a shitty situation. That's where you have guys like Trevor Lawrence and Tua. There's probably some other guys that I'm not thinking about that don't look as good as they are because they're in a bad situation, but they're good enough to keep their team out of going back into a situation where they can get the top picks in the draft. So then you're never going to make that perfect situation because you're having to kind of fill in other ways. And guys like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson that weren't as highly touted coming out, they get picked by better teams as they drop farther down in the draft. And those teams already have a good situation or are better equipped to put a good situation around them. So then you get a more talented QB in the long run because they get a good team to develop with. Along those lines, let me show you one more thing before I tell you why this ultimately helps balancing out the league. The Chargers in 2024 came into the draft with a franchise QB in Justin Herbert, who I got right there, and talent all over their defense. But the year before, they had a terrible season. So they got a new coach, a new front office, and they had the 5th overall pick with 2 distinct needs, offensive line and wide receiver. Ultimately, they picked the offensive tackle, Joe Alt, who helped their offensive line immensely and helped get them into the playoffs. But Malik Nabers, who was the 6th pick, 1 pick afterwards, was a Pro Bowl in his first season and looks like a potential superstar at wide receivers. If you ask Chargers fans, myself included, the team made the right pick because now Herbert actually has time to throw. But there is a little bit of like, what if we got Nabers? But if you're Malik Nabers, would you rather play with Daniel Jones, who didn't even make it through the whole season with the team, and now they got Jameis and Russell Wilson? Or would you rather play with Justin Herbert? And if you're the Chargers, wouldn't you want both Alt and Nabers? With rookie free agency, if teams have the money, they can build a nucleus in 1 year without selling the ability to fill in the gaps as that nucleus develops. We saw Houston kind of do this a couple years ago when they picked Stroud and Anderson back-to-back, and it worked out. But they had to sell a little bit to make that happen. But teams that need a quarterback and offensive line, which we've seen many times, the Bears last year, they can choose to pay for both instead of sending a QB out there to get killed in their first season, like Caleb Williams, who got sacked 68 times in 2024, or Andrew Luck, who would have loved this system. The Colts could never get a good O-line because from the start, Luck was so good. He had that Tua and that Trevor Lawrence situation. He's so good that the Colts were never going to be bad enough to get those early picks so they could get young offensive linemen. And offensive linemen are hard to get in free agency. They're hard to get through trades. Ultimately, Luck retired early because they could never figure it out. I know what you're saying, though. I can hear you through the screen. What's to stop, say, the Chiefs last year from just paying the rookie max for Marvin Harrison Jr.? They just get the best rookie or one of the best wide receivers in the draft. Well, nothing. Nothing should. Just like in free agency, if they have the money and Marvin Harrison Jr. wants to go to Kansas City, what should stop that from happening? Every other team in the league would have the same chance to get him. And while the rookie max is around $10 million a year, it's not that much by NFL standards. It's enough that teams can't just afford to buy all the best players in the draft. I mean, even so, look at the Chiefs. Would Harrison have stopped the Eagles' defensive line in the Super Bowl from just fucking them the whole game? And would the best offensive linemen just choose to go to Kansas City if they had their pick of the entire league and everyone was going to pay him the rookie max? I don't think that that's always going to be the case. And even if a team was like, we got $70 million in cap, we're just going to go get the 5 best players in the draft and build this crazy young team. And we got a couple young players already, so it's just going to be all these crazy young things. If all those players still choose to go to that place, they would then all have to eventually get paid. So if it panned out with all those draft picks, that team would be screwed in 4 years. And that's not to mention that there are 22 starters in football. So it is a terrible strategy to just chase only top-end talent for roster construction purposes. You'll never be able to keep that together. And if anybody gets hurt, you have no backups. And that's not even to say that the teams with the top picks aren't the best teams. The teams that are the best teams are the ones with the best scouting departments. The Eagles, the Rams. Like, these teams aren't picking at the top of the draft. They're finding ways to extract value from wherever they're picking. The Chiefs, for a long time, that might be falling off a little bit. The Chiefs, the Bills, these teams that are consistently picking at the back of the draft, why do they stay good? Why do they always find rookies that work? One, they have a great scouting apparatus, but 2, they have a great organization for them to come into. So they find a way to work with what they get. Even if they're not the absolute best player, they figure out how to get the most out of them. That's what this situation can be. It's not just putting good players on good teams or putting good players on a team. It's about figuring out how to make good players or great players from good players. Everybody that gets drafted is a good player. Everybody that gets drafted probably is a great player. It's how to find superstars out of good players, superstars out of great players. Not many franchises can put that together. That's why they keep picking at the top of the draft. And this idea comes from the fact that, most importantly, the NFL has a vested interest in the best football players going to the best situations for themselves. So by taking away this incentive for losing, the league as a whole should improve. Because if year after year your team sucks and you keep getting high draft picks only to screw those players up by not putting a good team around them or just having a shitty off-field organization, that's not a good place to work. We can all relate that there's been a place that we're not good at because it's not a good place. Those places don't deserve to continue to keep getting a better chance at the great players that we see coming out of college over teams that have built a strong organization that will improve those players. With rookie free agency, those best players will choose to go elsewhere, which will force those shitty organizations to figure it out or face not getting any of the top talent, even the ones that used to just fall in your lap because you were shitty. So how does this balance out the league? That's the question, right? How does it balance out the league? Well, it puts the onus on the organizations to attract talent and then develop it, rather than just being entitled to having a chance at this best talent by virtue of being a part of the NFL. That's all you are. It's just a part of the NFL. Well, you have to earn it. And if an owner can't figure that out, if they can't do that, they're going to struggle keeping up with the cost of owning an NFL franchise with no fans. Thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you've made it this far, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I know this is not fully college football, but it's college football adjacent with the NFL drafts, and I've had this idea for a while, so I wanted to present it to you. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of my videos, we got them for you. Over here, I've got my most recent video, which was College Football March Madness. It didn't get as many views as I'd like, so make sure you check that out. Tell a friend about it. It's a cool idea. I put a lot of work into it, so check that out and like that video as well. Then up here, I've got my most recent big popular video, which was my perfect Power 5 conference realignment. Check that one out as well. Other than that, I got my subscribe link on this side, and we'll catch you next time. See ya!